Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Lunch with Jim. And we're so glad you had a chance to join us. Today, we have a special guest. This is our athletic director, Trish Bedhauser. Trish is in her 10th year of running the athletics program at Stevenson, and she is a proud graduate of UW, University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. And what's the nickname?
Actually, Titans of UW Oshkosh.
Oshkosh, I'm sorry.
Whitewater
Oshkosh
was most definitely one of our rivals and a very good institution as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
very good. How many different Wisconsin schools are in there? Hyphen schools?
I'd have to go through them, but there's 6 or 7, and they make for a great conference up there called the WIAC.
Okay, and of course, Oshkosh is the best of them, just in case anybody's wondering. So in case you're wondering who I am, my name is Jim Conroy. I'm the Public Information Coordinator here at Stevenson High School, and we certainly encourage you to post comments during our discussion with Trish. We'll get to as many questions as we can. I happen to have a pretty extensive list of my own, so we'll see what we can get to during this broadcast. If we don't get to your question during the broadcast, we'll certainly answer it afterwards. So feel free to post a question and bear with us if we're not able to get to it while we're doing this live, but we will get to it one way or the other. So with that, are we ready to dig in?
We're ready. Let's talk about athletics.
Okay, so in sporting parlance, we're going to do like a 2-minute offense here. We're going to really rock through a lot of questions here. So getting started, for those of you that are watching this, in the upper corner of your screen, you see the big S. So you know that Stevenson incorporated some new logos this year. So we actually have 3 different logos, the S being one of them, but also Trish has, within athletics, there's a more Patriot head logo that they've been using, and I believe that Trish actually has one that she can hold up. Yeah, there we go. So this has been making its rounds this fall, and just wondering what people have thought. I mean, if you've been out to some sporting events this fall, you've seen some of our sports teams with the logos on them. What's been the reaction? What are people thinking?
Yeah, I think with any change in logo, you get a whole spectrum of reactions right away. Like, oh, I love it. Oh, I don't know. Or, oh, it'll grow on me. And so we're seeing a lot of that. We have traditionally not like splashed the logo all over our uniforms, even in the past, because we've always gone for something that's classic and we know that we're going to be using them for multiple years. So introducing it this fall was in, kind of phases. And we did have the football helmets with the S. We also had some volleyball uniforms with this logo kind of in the back shoulder blade area. And we're incorporating a lot more of that in our winter apparel as well. Cross-country teams wore it proudly too this fall. So the reaction has been very positive, and the whole experience, in my opinion, of from design, discussion, implementation was really, really fascinating.
And we've also gone with kind of a darker gold this year versus years past as well.
Right. So we kind of went away from a little bit of that yellowish gold into what most people would consider a more of a truer gold. And that's been well received. The color for sure has been well received.
Okay. So. True or false, all Stevenson coaches are required to get a Patriot logo tattooed on them? Is that true? No?
No, but we have seen some of our coaches do logos in their hair the past. Yes.
All right.
So who knows what will happen this year.
Do you get bonus points or like a bonus?
Everything is a bonus in athletics. Yes.
Well played. Well played. So let's jump into the area of facilities. As you know, we've got a lot of sports. What is it, 35 teams?
Yeah, with our allied sports, we're up to 39 sports now.
Okay. And then we have a lot of fields, obviously, that we need for these teams. And of course, over time, some of the fields need work, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that I wanted to ask first is in the stadium, we have what's called field turf. So for a long time we had grass, but by the time playoffs rolled around in football season, it was always a mess. So field turf's really been a great thing, but field turf has just a certain amount of life expectancy as well. And I think we've had that turf in there for about 10 years almost. Is that right?
Correct. This is our 10th fall on the stadium turf. And so that project was actually completed right before I came into this position. So I wasn't able to experience kind of the build up and all the planning into that. But moving forward, we are planning to replace that, and it's a tentative. Obviously, everything has to go through the right chains of approval. But we're hoping to have 2 more years out of that, including this year, and then in the summer of 2020, replace the stadium turf. So there's been a lot of great discussions already, but nothing for sure.
Okay. And speaking of field turf, I know that the school board has given its preliminary okay to incorporating some field turf, some fields in the area that is commonly known as the all sports courts. A long time ago, there used to be our school tennis courts. It's just north of the Fieldhouse area for those that are familiar with campus. And so my understanding is the school board has given its okay for a couple of fields to be placed that would have field turf that are currently grass area. Is that right?
That's correct. And thank you to the school board for reviewing this project and allowing us to move forward. So that project will start at the end of May, and we hope for completion mid-September to the end of September. But we will be replacing 2 of the grass fields in that area with a field turf product, and it will be one large field that we would then mark off for regulation soccer, field hockey, lacrosse, football. So there'll be multi-use facilities. We can even do some practice for baseball and softball out there as well. And the PE classes will be using it during the day. We will definitely find several uses for it. So you can guarantee that they will be busy.
Well, just like in the stadium when we brought in the field turf, it wasn't just for sports. I mean, our PE classes are using it as long as they can until the weather holds out, as far as the weather holds out. So let's go indoors and turn our attention indoors. And in the sports center, if you've had a chance to maybe go to a volleyball match this fall, you've noticed that we've got new scoreboards in the sports center. What's been the reaction to that?
Yeah, those that have been in here for volleyball, which we've had a lot of fans, girls volleyball regional champs this year, conference champs, kudos to them. We were able to do some really fun stuff with highlighting not only our own athletes, but opposing athletes as well. And there's so many great functions in that scoreboard, and it's easy to use. So we can splash up graphics, we can do advertising. We've been selling some sponsorships for that, and it's been well received. And you can do just basic scorekeeping as well. So we took into account that we're not the only show in town. Our intramural programs are widely popular, and we also have a lot of other activities, our pep assemblies, movie nights. There's so many things that go on in that sports center. So we wanted to be user friendly, which it has proven to be very much so. We run it from 2 iPads and just had a great experience so far. So we went with a company called Scoreboards, and it's been good service and a good product.
Any plans to put scoreboards in the Fieldhouse?
We are definitely in need of some upgrades in that area. We've got some Nevco products which have lasted very, very long, and we use them primarily for basketball games, junior Patriot games, some
wrestling,
wrestling, some volleyball. So those are things that we are fully aware of. We don't have any plans right now to replace them in the next year or so, but that type of scoreboard generally isn't quite as expensive as the one that we did in the sports center. So we may be able to get that squeezed in year by year. Yeah.
Are we using the Kiss Cam option on our scoreboards at this point?
It's interesting that you say that, because we are planning ahead for our December night Spirit Revolution invite, and that is an opportunity for our cheer programs and our Patriots programs to compete at home. And we also host a lot of other teams from the area. And we're looking at ways to focus in on the crowd, ways to highlight some of those teams without disrupting the competition itself. Nice. So, we want to keep that in mind. I don't know about Kiss Cam.
Well, yeah, and there's sanitary issues involved with that too. So now we're going to bounce back outdoors. So this is like totally stream of consciousness, it seems like. But I'm sure you get asked this question a lot. We have baseball, softball fields. Are there any plans to ever have lights on those fields?
On the turf fields or the baseball, softball, or all?
Any, all of the above.
I'm sure the neighbors next to us would have an opinion about that. So thank you, neighbors, for being so understanding up to this point. We appreciate you understanding that the stadium lights are on sometimes in the morning and sometimes late in the evenings. We are not planning at this point to add lights to baseball or softball or the new turf areas. Because of that, we may not ever host a super sectional in baseball, because the IHSA put that in as a requirement now to make sure that the hosts can get 2 games in on the same night, so no team has an advantage in terms of pitch count rules. But I think that if we were to look for a super sectional hosting opportunity, we could find one at another facility, and we would just be the host.
Yeah. Okay. So this is kind of it's a facility question, but it's something more than that too. So as you know, a couple of years ago, the school moved to, we changed our start time for the school day. So we went from 8:05 to 8:30. And part of the rationale that we put forward was we wanted to make sure the kids had a chance to get more sleep. We were convinced by the research that was out there that kids need to have more sleep. And so the thing I want to ask about is, we've got some teams that are practicing as early as 6 o'clock in the morning out there in the stadium. And I'm just wondering, what do you say about that? Because it seems like there's kind of a tension there, right?
Yeah, I would say that I would probably be asking that same question if I were in another seat. And we grapple with a lot of things here in athletics. And I think what we come back to is that point of balance where we want to obviously stay competitive. We want to make sure our athletes have opportunities to do training in the off season if they cared or so would like to. Sometimes we look at ourselves as an all service athletic department here, and even as a school. So if we can provide like strength and conditioning training in the off season for athletes, then that means their families don't have to go out and do that for $65 an hour or somewhere else. And those kinds of opportunities typically fall in the mornings because we have multi-sport athletes as well. So if they wanted to do a little bit of that, they can still commit to another sport. I think about our swimming and diving athletes, swimming in particular. If they want to maintain a high level of competitive edge, they do need to swim a certain amount of mileage in a day. And obviously there's different periodization training cycles that occur throughout the season, but there are points in time when the mileage is more important. And if they can split some of it up and go in the morning and then go in the afternoon for 45 minutes to an hour, that may benefit them as well physiologically. Your reference to the stadium turf, when we are able to get out there in the spring, we do fill that up in the afternoons from 3:30 to 9. And the spring is the tightest time for me because I'm scheduling 2 lacrosse programs, a soccer program, 2 track programs, and baseball and softball. If they can't get on their grass surfaces, they also like to use the turf as well. So to get any sort of significant chunk of time for a program, what I would consider an hour and a half minimum, I do need to use some of those morning hours just to fit that in. So things that we take into consideration, we would rather provide some sort of consistency for, say, a 3-week time period and schedule maybe one team every day from 6 to 7:30 for 3 weeks, rather than have them go until 9 on a Monday night and then come back on a Wednesday morning at 6 o'clock. Most of our athletes and coaches try to provide some sort of consistency in that regard. So, you're going to be getting up at 5:30 or 5:45. Maybe that's an opportunity to go home right after school, get some of the family and school commitments taken care of, and then get to bed a little bit earlier. But we know how important sleep is. I think sleep is important.
Now, let's kind of shift to after school. Of course, there are some sports that practice immediately after school, but there might be other ones that maybe don't get started until a little bit later. As a school, what do we do for those kids that have maybe they can't go home? They have to hang around, but they can't go right to practice. So, like if they're hungry, do we have some options for them at the school they can take advantage of? Besides just going to a vending machine?
Right, well, the vending machines are still pretty good options if you're here, because we have a wellness initiative and they've been revamped.
True.
So speaking about the wellness, there are opportunities during the lunch period to buy sandwiches or items that could stay fresh, so to speak, for a couple hours. And then also our Jasmines, which are the 2 kind of coffee areas, but they're not just coffee. I mean, they have a full selection of sushi, sandwiches, and a variety of other items. And those stay open until 4:30 in the afternoons. So those are two opportunities there. I pack a lunch. Do you pack a lunch?
I pack a lunch most days, yes.
So I love to pack my own lunches and my own dinners because I usually eat all of those here. I eat breakfast here too, so that's pretty sad. I'm a 3-person meal. So my lunch bag is very large when I leave the house in the morning.
Do we charge you rent? We should be charging rent.
I have a cot. No. So as far as I do think that's an important thing because nutrition is important for the student athlete. Yep. We do have the services of one of our alumni, Alex Stoller, who is a nutritionist, and he has volunteered to come in and speak to a lot of our athletes. And so he does that, and he does give some really great tips for athletes on what to pack if they're going to pack their own lunch or what to eat when they have a short window of time. And he's also doing some presentations for parents as well to what to shop for during the season to support your child in that way.
Wonderful. Excellent. Let's shift our focus a little bit and let's talk about a group that's very important at Stevenson, but sometimes flies under the radar, I would say, a little bit, the sports boosters. These are not just the people that maybe yell louder than anybody else at a sporting event, right? They do a little bit more than that. So what's their role? What's the role of sports boosters when it comes to Stevenson athletics?
I can't speak enough about the great work that Sports Boosters does. They are what I would consider an extension. I can't think of a good analogy off of the top of my head, but we have a board this year that has at least 10 executive board members, and they have worked really hard to raise funds that support our programs. And so the process that we have in place is that if programs have requests, they can make those requests twice a year in August and January, and then the board considers those requests. And we have made a commitment to ourselves as Sports Booster board members is that the money that comes in from memberships every year, that money should go back out towards our athletic programs in the form of requests and then anything that we were to generate by other means, which includes like clothing sales, small projects that they have been involved with, then that is what we do. We put that back in, and that continues to become a fund balance for our group. And so we they approved several donation requests in the August time period, August and September, and we'll be reviewing the January ones coming up soon. But it's a way for me to offset some of those bigger requests that coaches have and that I can't fit into the athletic budget. And what the boosters generally looks at is how many students does this benefit? And so if a coach has a request for equipment or some sort of gear, and it can benefit 2 to 3 to 4 more programs, then that's a slam dunk with the boosters because they want to reach as many student athletes as possible. So when a request comes up, let's do something in the athletic training room. Well, for sure, that's where most of our athletes are getting serviced and treated and everything. Or when they got a request to buy a minibus a few years ago, absolutely, that was no hesitation. They also contribute to the KIN Fund, which is our Kids in Need Fund, and they have made some major donations to our S2C program, our Stevenson to College program. So it's not only athletics. Their work goes beyond the athletic realm as well.
Okay. And if you want to get a better picture of what the Sports Boosters supports, take a look at their webpage at our website at d125.org, and you can see a listing what they've funded thus far this year. It's pretty interesting. I mean, every year there's about 15 to 20 different things that they fund. So it's really impressive. So I want to call a 30-second timeout here real quick, and I want to try to address a question that Millie has posed, which is, you were talking about the alumnus who comes here and talks about nutrition, and you were saying that he talks to students, and I think you said that he talks to parents as well. And Millie's wondering, well, when do parents find out about that, or when would parents be able to hear from him?
Well, that's a great question, Millie. He is working with our community parent network right now to put together a presentation that will be, that information will be sent out shortly on dates and times. So that's more of a formal presentation that's going to be coming in the next few weeks to months. I would have to check with our community parent network liaison on that if there's a specific date set.
Okay.
They've been meeting here in the fall to get that ready. If there is like a specific question, or if there was a time that you would like to connect with that individual, with Mr. Stoller, you can email me. My email is on the website, tbettauser at d125.org. And I can also set that up as well.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the question, Millie. Hope that helps a little bit. Okay. Getting back to various questioning. One of the things, and we've talked about this over the years, and I really like this. Obviously varsity sports get a lot of attention. I mean, that's the top level, the papers cover, the media covers, et cetera, et cetera. But, we actually have more kids involved in the non-varsity sports level. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things that's interesting is the whole dynamic of, well, how much do you play to win, right, at the non-varsity level versus the varsity level? And one of the things that you've told me over the years, and I think we still adhere to this, and I really like it, is this idea of in terms of phonetic sounding, there's like 3 F's, right? So fun, fundamentals, and 500. And I wonder if you might explain that for people. I think it's really cool, personally.
Yeah, I think it at the lower levels, in which we consider non-varsity levels, I think it's important to keep that in the forefront as a coach, as an athlete, as a parent. And we have found through our student voice surveys that we've done through with the coordinator of our social emotional learning, Molly Gosline, we have found from the feedback with those surveys that first and foremost, athletes, they're coming out for a sport because of a few factors, but they absolutely love the sport. They like to be out there, like to be active. They like to be with their classmates, working towards a common goal. And they want to learn, and they want to get better at their sport. So I emphasize that with our coaches on several occasions. It's definitely okay to have those expectations for your athletes, because what I've seen is that our athletes crave the learning environment. I mean, you can see that walking through our halls. They want it in everything they do, also in athletics. And they want to get better, and they want to enjoy that time. I am fully aware of the investment that's being made by our student athletes here. And if they're not having fun, then we're doing them an injustice because they are investing a lot of time in that. The other thing that I talked to my coaches about, and we met this morning as a head coaches meeting at 6:30 a.m. Yeah, so the coaches are doing it too. We're getting up early and finding time to get together and meet. But we talk a lot about where performance and purpose kind of intersect. And I don't know if that makes sense, but the ideal situation for any season is that performance is high, and that purpose is high, and that purpose is around relationships with athletes and with your community, coaches, and everyone. You can endure some of those seasons where performance may be low if you have the purpose and you have the relationships. And so our coaches, we've all been through those seasons. And so I think they acknowledge it's the very, very difficult season where performance is low and the relationships are struggling. Yeah. And that's very hard on everyone. So, I mean,
I just like the philosophy because, sort of taking a long-term view, looking back on my own really mediocre high school athletic experience, I couldn't tell you what our team record was in any given year, but I could tell you my general impressions of what I remember about playing baseball, my coaches, that kind of thing. But I don't know what our win-loss record was, except we had more losses than wins. I know that, sorry. But it just seems to me that, sometimes we overdo the whole wins and losses things, especially at the younger levels. Personal opinion, not necessarily Trish's opinion. Okay, so let's shift our focus to something that's a pretty serious subject and one that has been in the news quite a bit lately. In fact, there's even been major motion pictures made about this kind of thing. So concussions are a big deal. This is certainly something where when you and I were growing up, concussions were rarely, if ever, talked about. I mean, we'd talk about getting our bell rung, right? But, you just shook it off, right, supposedly, and all that. But, I think we've come a long way in terms of on our understanding of the body and head injuries and whatnot. And so, and you've been kind of out in front on this. I mean, you've had Stevenson talking about concussions and having athletes look at things and understand things for a long time. I just wonder if maybe you can kind of give us a sense of some of the things that we've done here at Stevenson to reduce concussions. And also, what do we do in those cases where maybe a concussion has occurred? How do we handle treatment as well?
Yeah, there's a lot of information all balled up into that little statement you just made.
Yeah, good luck answering it.
Yeah, so I don't want to take any of the credit in this area. I have relied on our two head athletic trainers, and Tom Blow has been here for over 30 years, and he has served as our head athletic trainer, and he has been even more out front of this, and he had developed a checklist of questions that you ask a student athlete in the event that they may have concussive like symptoms way before the IHSA or the Sports Medicine Advisory Committee had started talking about that. So when I first arrived in this position, he'd already been doing that for several years, and so Tom was way ahead of it. And then, as you said, there's more awareness now and more things going on statewide and nationwide. Some of the things that we've just recently done here that I want to highlight, we have, thanks to Dr. Beltran from North Shore, he has agreed to come on to our team, and he serves as a great resource. He's a neurologist out of North Shore, and he serves as a great resource for our athletic trainers and for our student athletes. And he was present at many of our fall home athletic events. And he is also a member of our concussion oversight team. So we have a team that meets and includes one of our counselors, Patty Martin, our nurse, Lisa Lau, a social worker, Claire Bergia, and then our head athletic trainers, myself, and then we have Dr. Reams, Dr. Piroth, Dr. Beltran, who have also all been a part of that at one point in time. So it has been a really great experience there. So we're constantly revising, and we've just recently been spending more time looking at the information that came out of the Berlin study from 2017 that was released on with some new stuff in terms of treating concussions. So we're definitely spending some time in that area. As student athletes here, we have been impact testing for at least 8 years. And so we do that here for a student athlete twice during their time. So they may do it their freshman, junior year. If they're coming into a sport for the first time their sophomore year, it might be sophomore, senior, but we do that every season, and that's taken care of by our athletic trainers. Just the education in general has been so significant. Our coaches are more aware. They're building in practices into, they're building in proper technique into their practices under the guidance of our athletic training staff. And so it's been really nice to be a part of that. You did mention that sometimes student athletes do have the concussion, and that's where we would work with the nurses here to provide communication out in terms of return to learn and return to play. So information goes out to teachers on what a student or student athlete can do in the classroom and what are the expectations there. And that's thanks to our counselors and our student services team with all that communication going out. So a lot of people are involved. This is not just one division here at Stevenson that's working on this. There's many parts. Now, when it comes to concussions, I'm sure that you keep track numbers wise. We know in numbers how many kids maybe experience concussions.
Obviously in the news, it mostly centers around football. Just wondering what the data show for Stevenson. Is it most of the concussions, are they football players, or is it something else? I've even heard that soccer, there's a fair amount of concussions.
So we do, in all schools in the state now, report to the IHSA when a concussion occurs. And we go on, and I go on every month, and I updated that, and I did that just a few days ago. So for athletics in here, from the beginning of the school year today we've had 22 concussions from our student athletes, and some of those are actually out of season athletes too. So that are they may have got it in a car accident, or they may have got it like skateboarding or something, and they're still treated by our staff. They're coming in and they're in that protocol. We do see the majority of those 22 have been in football this fall. That hasn't always been the case, but so far up to this point it is. And then the next one, like you mentioned, is soccer. But there really isn't like a consistent pattern, so to speak. When you look at our data here, you see it everywhere from cheerleading to golf. We had an athlete with, just across the board.
That seems like something I would do if I was golfing. I would get a concussion because I'm so bad. I would do something to myself. Now, in football, in the 10 years that you've been athletic director, equipment's come a long way, and helmets are much safer now than they were probably when you started. I'm imagining.
Yeah, we had a photo shoot, and you were a part of it a few weeks ago, where we brought back all of Stevenson's football coaches dating back to 1965. And Coach Tom Bauman, the first football coach here at Stevenson High School, brought a helmet from his first or second season here. And I was amazed. I was really amazed. Just very, very little padding. He did not have the face guard on it, not because it wasn't part of it, but he just didn't have it at the time. And we compared even that one to a helmet that we had in early 2000s to the helmets that we have now. And they're very, very different. More padding, of course, and more support in certain areas of the helmet. And there's even different models. If you go out and buy a car, it's the same way buying a helmet. You could buy the deluxe, and which we generally do here. And we get the ones with the Insight technology. We have Rydell helmets here, and our athletic trainers are able to use the Insight technology to get data on any sort of blows and the G-force with those blows. And so that's been interesting as well. Now, I will say, in working with Dr. Beltran, I did ask him that same question. Is there a helmet that's better than that? And there's a lot of studies out there. And I don't think that he would want to jump on board and say one is necessarily better than the other. The best thing that you can do is educate and have proper technique in the sports that you're doing.
Now, you've been in athletics for 3 decades now. Are student athletes today in high school bigger, stronger, faster than they have ever been? That seems to be a cliche, but is it true? I don't know.
I don't necessarily think so.
Okay.
No,
okay.
I haven't.
Because you hear that sometimes in the concussion talk about, the reason why concussions are so significant now is because everybody's bigger, stronger, faster, et cetera. But just curious, it's interesting. The IHSA does have acclimatization periods for football. And so when an athlete, for example, comes out here for the very first time, perhaps a freshman, sophomore, junior, and they haven't played the sport, there's obviously a learning curve just with any sport. But then with football, there may be a little bit more. And every season, there is a strict day-to-day progression laid out by the IHSA. Day one, this is what you can do as a football program. You can wear only the helmet. You can wear a helmet and pads. You can progress to helmet, pads, and the full gear, etc. But so what our football coaches have to do is, for every single individual, they have to keep track of that. So if a young man
isn't there on the first day of football, and then say they join the team the third or the fourth day, they're on a different progression than the athletes that have been there. And so it's challenging for our coaches to balance that, and they do an amazing job of making that happen. So I think that, combined with a little bit perhaps less of the day-to-day contact, may result in the first time an athlete really goes live in football could be that game, that first game. Because there really isn't live play that much in the practices leading up to it.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's been interesting to see how some of that evolves. And like when I speak with our coaches, it's not very often that they go live in practice.
Interesting. Now, you mentioned something called baseline testing. Is that something that the sports boosters help fund, I believe? Is that right?
Yeah, thanks for reminding me. Yeah, so we do the impact testing, baseline concussion testing. And so the sports boosters does fund that for our student athletes. And for over 2,000 athletes, you can see, doing approximately half of them every year. Yeah. It's a very nice donation.
All right. Well, we have a ton of athletes that do some extraordinary things at Stevenson. We have over the years, and people like to watch this, but not everybody can necessarily be there when a sporting event is happening. So one of the things we've done in recent years is we've made it possible to watch sporting events at Stevenson through live streaming. Currently, we're with what's called the NFHS Network. Previously, we were with something called the Cube. And I think one question I would just like to ask is, with the Cube, everything was free. We could watch everything for free, but now with NFHS Network, you have to pay to see most things. Just wonder if you could maybe address that, why we chose to move to that different model.
Well, we did choose to move to that last spring, and the NFHS Network does a great job. They have a partnership with the IHSA. And so they're also nationally, they're out there doing this for schools outside of the state of Illinois as well. So anytime that the IHSA were to have an event that's broadcast, whether it's state series wrestling, basketball, swimming, whatever, then it's covered on NFHS TV. So an individual who has a subscription, perhaps just to watch a Stevenson event, would automatically get all of those events included in that subscription as well. So that was a nice little perk. Before that, you would have to go on and pay pretty much the same price that you would pay for everything, like $9.95 for a single event to watch a state series event. So that was a part of it. The other part was that they were running a partnership with the Pixelot camera, and so that was the only place you could get the Pixelot camera. So good for them; they've got that taken care of, and then they were the only one to offer it. But the Pixelot camera is an automated camera that we have mounted in our sports center and then in our stadium as well. And it's only about this big, and it contains 4 HD cameras, all in that little capsule. Wow. And it follows the movement of the competition by itself. It's automated. And so we have been able to offer a lot more events through streaming them than we did in the past. And we can do lower level events. It no longer requires the Stevenson Broadcast Network crew and a setup, which they still do for some of our events, and we appreciate the fact that they do. So that was another part that factored into it. And then, interestingly enough, you mentioned the Cube. NFHS bought the Cube. About a month after we made the decision. So
very timely.
Yeah, we were right in, and so we really did enjoy our time with the Cube. That was a great organization, great people, and they were awesome with our transition. They gave us all of our files that we had archived,
nice.
and we were able to put them into NFHS and keep those archived for people.
Very good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of money, a quick question I forgot to ask during our sort of sports boosters segment. You know, one of the questions that sometimes parents have is, when you register your kid to go to Stevenson, you have the option of getting an athletic or an activity fee, right, that allows you access to sporting events. But then we also, during registration, give families the option to become a member of the Sports Boosters.
Right.
And so for $75, you become a Sports Boosters member, and it gives you admission for a family of 4 to like football, boys basketball, anything we might charge admission for. So I think sometimes there's some confusion, like, well, first of all, should I, if I do the Sports Booster thing and it covers the family of 4, does that mean my kid is covered under that, or do they still have to do the activity fee? So could you just kind of walk us through the whole ticketing process, for kids that want to watch sports?
So the $75 covers a family of 4, and that does include your student. Okay. And if you purchase that during the registration process in the summer, when you're registering your child and filling out that information, it will show up on your student's ID. Okay. And it'll say event. Gotcha. If you're not interested in a family membership, and that might be the case, like you don't ever see you or yourself or anyone else in your family going to an event, but you know that your child wants to go, then you would do the student event. Gotcha. And the same thing would happen. You would check that box on registration, and then your child would have event on their ID card. Okay. If you purchase it outside of that registration time period, which you can still get a booster membership through the school store. You could go on there today. I encourage you to do so. You could go on there today and purchase one of those. Then I would have to find out if you wanted that on your child's ID, and they would have to go to admin operations office up in the 2400 hallway. Okay. And they can swap out IDs and get it on there. Okay. So bottom line, kids, if you're going to come watch Stevenson sports, bring your ID, right? Yeah, if you want to get in free. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Good. All right. So another big thing at Stevenson, and actually we're just around the corner from a bunch of our student athletes announcing where they're going to continue their playing careers. And so, the idea of, or the topic of NCAA recruiting comes up often. I think one of the things that might be good to address is, sometimes it's hard to kind of keep your finger on what's happening in the NCAA world as far as recruiting practices and whatnot. Have there been any major changes or anything that our parents and students ought to be aware of? So there's been some changes in terms of contact and when they can, when they can't. And it's very difficult to summarize, like you said, because some of it is sports specific. I would say the biggest change that I have seen is regarding the unofficial visits. So prior to this, the change, which was just implemented prior to this year, a student athlete and their family could plan an unofficial visit with the school, and the school would not be picking up any of the cost for that, but the members of the coaching staff and any of their staff beyond that could have contact with you while you're on campus. And so that was definitely used, in the recruiting process. It was a way for athletes and programs to kind of, see how things work. And that is no longer the case, that coaches can have contact. Okay. So you can still do unofficial visits. You can still go to campus. You can check out facilities, meet with academic staff, everything that you would do as if you were not planning to do athletics. And, that will be a big part of your decision at that point. So, but you cannot meet with the coach. Okay. Just curious, in your role as athletic director, does the NCAA say that a high school athletic director can or cannot be involved with a student athlete's decision-making process? So, for example, can you give advice to a kid who's thinking about playing college sports, or do you have to be totally hands-off in your role? I don't think there's any can or can't. if a student athlete comes in and asks, hey, what do you think? Do you have any experience? I would definitely share anything that I have to offer. But I'm typically not immersed in that process like our coaches are.
Mm-hmm.
And so if the advice that I would give when it comes down to specific schools would not be fair.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
I would say that athletes should rely on their high school coach and their parents, any other family members that have experience in that, and reach out to alumni, network with some of those. We have like a really good network here of parents that have been through the process and that, are willing to share some of those experiences.
Yeah. And of course, every year there's a North Suburban Conference NCAA night where there's a rotation. Different schools host it every year, but it's a great opportunity to find out what's happening in the recruiting world, things you need to know and whatnot. Yeah, and that's usually in September, right?
Right.
I want to say?
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If I was a king of the NCAA, I would outlaw this business of coaches being able to text the student athletes. Like, it sounds like they're literally coaches that'll say, "Good night, Joey. Have a great night. Don't forget to brush your teeth." I mean, it just seems like it's gone kind of crazy in terms of contact. Personal opinion. I don't know about you.
Well, as being someone who wore that hat for several years as a college recruiting coordinator, it's exhausting on all fronts, for sure. And I think that the rules that have been put in place are really trying to provide balance for everyone. And so it continues to go back and forth between hands-on and not hands-on, and it's very difficult to legislate. So I think that's the concern there. But
you never reminded a recruit late at night to brush their teeth, did you?
No, I can't say that I did that.
Okay, so we're going to round third base here, head for home. I'm a baseball guy, so I had to use that analogy at some point. Got some personal questions I'd kind of like to ask you here. When you were in high school, behind the Cheddar Curtain, you played several sports, right?
Yeah.
What sports did you play?
Yeah, so I played volleyball and tennis in the fall, and then I played basketball in the winter and softball in the spring. So I played 2 years of volleyball and 2 years of tennis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite sport?
Do I have a favorite sport now, or did I have
whatever.
a favorite sport?
Yeah, or has it changed?
I really enjoyed, out of those four, I would say that I enjoyed softball, and I felt like that probably was one sport that I excelled at a little bit more than the others, even though I chose to go on and play basketball at like a next level. But yeah, and I still enjoy, I was a catcher, and so I didn't realize at the time that the catchers kind of have some sort of like bond. Now that I meet other catchers, we look at each other funny, but
well, it's the most important position on the field.
I was
a catcher too.
You were a catcher? See? Yeah, we look at each other funny.
Yeah. See, they usually put the smartest person at catcher in baseball and softball.
Yeah.
Now, your experience and mine, although I was really bad at the things I did, but I did multiple sports. I just didn't do any of them very well. Is a little unusual because it seems like today, more and more, kids are sort of concentrating on just a single sport. And I know that in your time here as athletic director, you've really been trying to encourage kids to get involved in multiple sports. I wonder if you can just talk about that. What's the advantage? Why should a kid maybe play multiple sports instead of just one? Because I'm sure you've heard the argument many times, hey, if my kid doesn't focus on X, then there's no chance that he or she is going to be able to make it in college or be pro, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure you've heard it all many times.
Right. And yes, I do strongly advocate for multi-sport participation. And you mentioned why. I mean, there's a multitude of reasons, from just being able to meet new people, learn from, different learning styles in terms of coaches and those people that are around you. Physiologically, there's a lot of benefits in terms of injury prevention if you're using more than a core group of muscles throughout the entire year. And I just think that you want to experience as much as you can in that realm. And when you get to a place in your career, and it's going to happen for many of our athletes, that maybe that's, between their sophomore and junior year and junior and senior year, you're going to start to feel like, oh, maybe I do have a chance to take this beyond, or maybe this is something that I do. And I think that's the point in time where you sit down with your family, you sit down with your coaches, and you talk about those goals at that time, and how you can still have balance. But I would say, prior to that time, especially as a freshman here, if athletics is your thing, then we have kind of a thing with our coaches, but say try three, get out there and try three. Some of our coaches, Coach Cook and Coach Jorth in particular, organized a Future Patriots night last spring where we had an open evening of just kind of training together and learning about good, healthy practices. And it was a 2-hour event on an evening in May. And that's what the message was. We had a lot of male athletes, a lot of female athletes. We had a lot of coaches, about 25 coaches came out for the event here at Stevenson, our coaching staff. And our message to them was, try three. So.
Now, okay, I'm going to go back into your way back machine again. So we're going to go back to Wisconsin. You're growing up. Did you have a favorite athlete? Like, did you have somebody you aspired to be like?
Well, I came from a rather large extended family. My father was in a family of 8, and so there were actually a lot of athletes in the family. And ever since I remember, my dad introduced me to every single sport, and we even made up a few. I mean, he would come home and we would have to, I can remember he would walk home from work still in his work clothes. And he was a postal supervisor for 30 plus years. So shirt and tie, suit and tie, whatever it was. And he would take a tennis racket and a tennis ball, and he would hit it straight up into the air. And my sister and I would have to, we would play like our version of 500. We'd have to catch fly balls with this tennis ball. And there were just many comments that were directed at us but that was our version of just, getting ready to play and going out and having fun. And so I think if I were to go back to an athlete or athletes, it was really members of my family. I had an aunt who was a catcher before me. She was the youngest one in my dad's family, so there wasn't a lot of years in between us. So it was just a few years after she graduated that I was able to come in, and there, everywhere I look around, there were athletes in my family. So.
Now, as you mentioned earlier, you were at one time the recruiting coordinator for Indiana University's women's basketball program. So you've got a background as having been a basketball coach. And in fact, before you took this role as Stevenson's athletic director, you were the girls basketball coach here at Stevenson.
Yeah.
But you've been out of it for 10 years now coaching. Do you miss it? Do you miss coaching?
I absolutely do. And I said with our head coaches this morning that watching how our coaches work together. We had a couple situations this fall where we had some unexpected circumstances with some of our staff, and we had people step up and do some amazing things with no ego, no hesitation. And those to me were like my scoreboard. Just being able to work with our coaches and athletes in that way. And I can honestly say, it happens every day around here where I see our coaches set aside their own agenda or their own wants, needs, whatever, and put first and foremost what those athletes need and what they're hoping to accomplish. Put that in the forefront of what they're doing. And to me, that's my scoreboard. That's how I get motivated. And I do miss, that excitement, that adrenaline, everything that goes with getting ready. And I still feel a lot of that when I'm, sitting in the stands or observing a competition or watching, like our girls tennis team who finished 3rd at state. Congratulations to the Coley sisters who finished 2nd in doubles. I still feel all of that excitement when somebody has that, that great moment. I don't necessarily miss the really low ones.
Yeah.
And, but so I miss that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so last question, and we really appreciate your time today.
Mm-hmm.
So you've already established that you basically live here at Stevenson. We don't know if you actually live anywhere else, but you do spend a lot of time here monitoring, our athletic program. So the question is, do you get a chance to go out much to college or professional sporting events? Do you get a chance to just be a fan, of non-Stevenson sports?
Non-Stevenson. I'm trying to think back if I did anything this fall. So my niece, Reese DeRusso, go Reese. She is a volleyball player at UW Stevens Point this fall.
Okay.
I made it over to one of their games at UW Whitewater. So I was excited to see to see that level, and it was great because I was walking through the hallways. I'm looking through some of the display cases, and I see some of our alum pictured, in there. So we have one of our tennis players, Peyton Neerman, I believe,
sure.
is over there. Mm-hmm. And so we have some alum playing over there. So that was really nice. As far as that, I followed the Brewers.
Okay.
I followed them passionately.
For the Brewers,
passionately. Yeah. I went to a game in June, but I did not get to a game down the stretch. But my nephew, Dylan, works for the Brewers, and he had a great season working with them. And so that was nice to see. When I have time, I don't know if I get to college. I mean, I have an athletic family. My sister has 3 kids that play sports. Mm-hmm. Her youngest, Dustin, is a freshman. And so getting to those events would be a priority for me. Doing some stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, we really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
And continued success to you in the athletic program. And we thank you for watching us. And if you have any questions, feel free to post them even after this video is over. Thanks again for your time. And we look forward to seeing you again on Lunch with Jim. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.